What is going on? What is going on, people? I'm hoping you all can hear me. I wasn't able to do my audio testing, but you know what? I do want to try it out. Give me 1 second. I s Those of you who want to catch me live can catch me live. See something. Okay, perfect. Okay, so y'all can hear me. Perfect, perfect. I am Michael Seville. I'm your real estate guy here in Palm Beach, Florida. Normally we have my brother Joe Simmons, but he got caught up today. So it'll just be you and I, and won't be on long, probably. But if you have any questions, comments, please put it in there. I may take questions at the end of the show if you do have any questions, but other than that, we can just really jump right into it. Last week, we are in the Family Matters series. We're kind of talking about experiences and my experience within the family court system. Stay out. That's first and foremost. Um, It'll kill me at Toastmasters. However, last week we kind of went over some of the terms that you would hear during your journey if you do have to do it, and a lot of people will have to do it, having children with divorces, uh, and just child custody within general. I did mostly. We're all going to be talking about child custody because I'm not versed in divorces, but it's all part of the same legal process. Again, let me make sure I have this scrolling because let me make sure, and I'm reading it. I am not an attorney. I'm not an attorney. This is based on personal experience and it's for informational purposes only. Okay? So please consult with a licensed attorney for legal advice. And I'm going to keep that scrolling throughout this entire episode. Okay, so as you all can see the title, I'm sure you had a chance, if not, to go read the description. This is the child custody journey. Today, in the part two of the series, we'll be talking about the preparations, the pitfalls, and it says patience, but you're gonna need it. And we'll see how far I go into it. I have some notes here, so I'm gonna kind of read off my notes. And normally the brother asks me questions, but I'll do as much as I can. Again, if you all have questions or comments, even if you catch this and latter after this live goes forward, you can always put questions in there, or you all can reach out to us. You also see our information there in the emails, myself or my brother Joel, etc. All right. So what you're going to notice, and this is what I found quite interesting, and this was actually an attorney who told me as I was going through the process, and I've noticed that and I'm going to speak out because I'm a man, right? So I'm going to speak of my experience, and so the naturally the opposite person would be the biological mother. You'll notice certain, and it's almost nature at this point because I've been around so many people. Once you're in this space, you get to be around a lot of people who are going through similar things. They handle it quite differently than everybody else. Everyone, rather, they have their own little nuances, but overall, it's all pretty much the same. It's on the spectrum, and people are either, you know, they do very damaging things, and some people don't do anything at all, but it's all within the spectrum, so you can find out where you are within the spectrum. But most responses are the same, and oftentimes it's not even really responses, it's more like reactivity. So that's why I wanted to make this episode, so you can know what to expect, so you can respond versus react, because we tend to react, or I've noticed that a lot of men tend to react in the same way. And so what I want you to do is I want you to respond. And once you start to respond, you'll start to see different outcomes versus what you'll hear within the space. Okay, so one of the first things to expect is, and you hear it a lot, so this shouldn't be new information. This is going to be gatekeeping behaviors. And some of it can border to parental alienation. Some people don't take it that far, but there will be some gatekeeping behaviors. And we explained gatekeeping before. It's about a person who essentially they use the children, they withhold the children, or the children can only be, you only can see the children at certain time, certain times, and then it has to be according to their schedule. We discussed some of the reasons why I think there's gatekeeping, why it seems that there's gatekeeping behavior. It's societal expectations, the tender-year doctrine. We discussed that on the last episode. So if you want to know what the tender-year doctrine is, go back and check that out. But either way, we know that this is gatekeeping behavior, and I think most of it has with the way that society is set up. So they're seeing other people do it. Because what you'll find is that women tend to give each other a lot more information than the men are having. Men tend to, what I've in this space, what I've experienced is men tend to complain and throw themselves upon the mercy of the court, whereas women tend to embrace the court. And one of the things that you have to get past in this, if you're going through this journey, is the avoidance of the court. A lot of men tend to want, and you should, if you can communicate, you all can get along. There's respect, there's equal respect there. There's both reasonable people, which you all should be for the sake of the child, because really, remember, it's in the child's best interest. Then you don't necessarily need, the mother, father, judge to come and tell you exactly what it is that you need to do through an official order. However, for whatever reason, if you're here now, you may have gotten past that point. If you haven't gotten past that point and you still can communicate, then it would be better for you all to come up with your own parenting plan and communicate and figure out what's best for the child. But what you will see, I'm going to tell you. Okay, so we'll go over some gatekeeping behavior. Gatekeeping behavior would be, like I said, it'll be on one person's, they're the ones who actually dictate the situation. Oh, you only can come to see the child if I'm around. You can't take the child here unless I'm there. You can't take the child around this person. When technically, if you all aren't together, and that this is why you're here, whatever, as long as the child isn't in any danger. And I feel like if you're not disrespecting, so that's subjective, but that people want to say you can't bring this person around my child, you can't do this. Well, I saw that you have the child here, I didn't want the child here, so guess what, you can't, like, once again, it's all about, you can't have the child, you can't do this with the child. You'll see that a lot. Some other gatekeeping behavior is moving. You'll see a lot of people move. They move to different counties, they move to different states, they move and they take the child with them, and they establish residency, and then they go through that place's jurisdiction. I was speaking to a gentleman recently, and he said how the mother took the child out of daycare and moved with the child to Atlanta. And you're going to be up against a lot of ignorance if you don't understand that, because they can't technically do that. So this is one of the things that you should do, especially if you start to see some of this gatekeeping behavior, or any of this behavior that I'm going to talk about today, is you need to file something. You need to petition. You don't need to. You should go seek legal help. It would behoove you to petition for paternity, or petition for timeshare, or get some type of order in place, because what you're also going to be up against is the status quo. What exactly is going on within the child's life? How long has this happening? Because one of the things that most courts, and I believe most judges, want is to see stability and consistency. Well, if you wait until the child is 5 to 6 years old, what you end up doing is, and this happens a lot, is you end up having to correct things that you could have gotten right from the beginning. Okay, so once you start to see some of these behaviors taking place, once you start to see that this person doesn't value what it is that you have to say. This person doesn't value your, any kind of direction you want to take. There's no conversation, there's no consideration being done. You need to start moving in this direction. And one of the things that we tend to do, and I spoke about it before, is that we tend to avoid, we tend to be scared of, we tend to stay ignorant to the process. And in my experience, the process is the process, and it's fair. And me personally, a person who likes to have structure, is I don't want anyone to dictate it. And also the process takes time. So, and we'll get into that. So look for any gatekeeping behavior. Let me see what else I have on gatekeeping behavior. Yeah, so restricting the access to the child, and that tends to tear a lot of people down. The next thing you'll start to see financial pressures and manipulation. If you don't do this, if you don't, and I definitely want to have a show strictly for child support, but if you don't do this, if you don't send this, how come you're not doing this? How come you're not sending this? It'll borderline get abusive. And I'm not telling anyone not to take care of their children. However, if people are withholding the child because you're not giving any money, and we spoke about this before, child support and timeshare are two separate they're two separate things. When you file in court, they're two separate issues. So you'll start to hear financial pressures. You need to be spending this. This is what they expect. Sometimes they're looking at you, and because you're not complaining about whatever it is that you have going on, it seems to me that they have this thought process in their mind of what they are owed, and there's actually a formula for it. So pay attention to the financial pressures, the manipulation, how much you owe them, what needs to happen. Uh, Dropping off the children to make it hard for you, and oh, he didn't want to take his child at this point in time. Just pay attention to these things. Once again, if you see any of these things coming up, I'm telling you now, this is some of the things that you should expect. Every situation is quote unquote different, but I'm starting to see the responses. The reactions are normally the same. Devaluation tactics. This is when you start to hear the different names that are being called. You start to hear the deadbeat dads. You start to hear manning up. You're not a man. You're all kinds. They don't want to take their child. They don't want. The only reason why you're here. You're the only reason why they want the timeshare is because of money. Like you. This is you're going to hear this time and time and again. Whether or not this is true or whether it's not, is not really up to them. I mean, you can take a look at yourself and hopefully know exactly why it is you're doing what you're doing. Hopefully it is to spend time with your child. Hopefully it is, you're not a quote unquote deadbeat father. Because I don't want to absolve anybody of any of those things. What I do want to say is that these are some of the things that you're going to hear. They're going to devalue you. It's interesting as I went through the process, it almost seems, and this is, you know, listening and speaking with hundreds of guys during the last, however many year, 2 years. The process being the same is these different devaluation tactics, and how it seems as if in certain people's minds that there can't be two good parents. It's almost as if one of the parents believe that if this other person is a good parent, or if my child loves to be around this other parent, that it makes me less of a parent, or I'm the only one that can do this correctly. So I want you to pay attention to the different devaluation tactics that you will see that come up. And pay close attention. And it's the behavior, it's not the person. I truly believe that it's the behaviors of it, and a lot of it comes from societal norms. They hear other people saying it, and they expect it, or they believe that this is going to happen, and they look for things to make this true. So pay attention to that, because from those devaluation tactics, I start to see within the man a lot of guilt and shame, especially if you don't really have a strong knowing of yourself. If you don't know you, if you don't know yourself to be a great parent, thank God I already had a go at it, so no one can really tell me any different. I'm being the best father that I know how to be, and as I go along, I make the adjustments and the understanding within the situation, and that's all you can do. The best thing that a parent can do is to be present. And when I say present, doesn't mean that you're just there, because it's really not about the quantity of time. It's more about the quality time. Because you can just take your child to a park, especially if you're going through having money issues or whatever the case may be. Take them to the park. They'll enjoy that just as much as they enjoy a trip to Disney World, because they're spending time with you. Those are the things that they'll remember. So pay attention to people attempting to shame you. And I'll give you the distinction between shame and guilt. Shame is when you're not living up to their values, what they value, and guilt is when you feel like you're not living up to what you value. So pay attention to those two things. I just gave you the distinction between the two of them. and say, well, this is what they believe it is. And probably the shame part is the reason why you probably two aren't even together. So pay attention. This is what you value. That's fine. However, on my parenting time, this is what I value, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. So presence is huge. Uh, next, I'm running through these. If you have any questions, please put it in the comment section. I'll definitely take some. The types of attorneys and their roles. I've listened to a lot of different attorneys. I've dealt with the attorney on the other side one on one. I've dealt with my own attorneys one on one. A lot of you'll notice that it seems most people who are in this situation, and most people in general, probably have attorneys for two reasons. One is for some type of personal injury. These are, some personal injury situation. Attorney comes in, you know, you know, as far as whatever side you're on, and then here for these family court issues. I looked it up. There's like over 110,000 attorneys in Florida. I think the median debt, student loan debt for each attorney is like 100 to 200,000. So you can see why the price and prices of attorneys are what they are. And there's some very good attorneys, but I would say the majority of them are they're just average, right? And the good attorneys will cost you. I've seen things upward of $500 to $750 an hour. You can go down to $200 an hour, and really, I can't say that because I've seen good attorneys that didn't charge much, and I've seen bad attorneys that charged a lot. So you really want to pay attention to the different attorneys. You have several different kinds of attorneys. So I guess for each of your needs, like your situation better than anyone else, you can see an aggressive one. An aggressive attorney is like, we're going to trial. This person is this, and in their mind, you're going to trial, and they're really going to hammer it home. There's going to be a lot of different motions. They're going to do a lot of discovery, especially to figure out what exactly is going on. And remember, all these things cost. So from the deposition to the interrogatories to the back and forth between the attorney and the other attorney, if that's what's going on, the emails, how long the other side is dragging it out. So you got to pay attention to these things to see exactly how much is gonna cost you. I think an aggressive attorney is definitely gonna cost more because they'll probably be doing more. You got a cooperative attorney. I had one of these where they want to figure this thing out, like what exactly is going on. They take the time to listen to you. They're probably not as aggressive, so there's things that probably will be missed. They're going to wait for the other side. I think if both sides have decent attorneys and the attorneys know each other, which oftentimes they do. Sometimes they don't, especially here in South Florida, because you have people who are practicing in Palm Beach County that are from Dade and Broward because they got to pay those student loan debts. They got to get to the money. I get it. And then you have the mediator focused attorney, people who want to get this thing done in mediation. I think it's interesting. And I say it's interesting because after you do discovery, your attorney kind of knows how much money each side has, especially after you fill out your financial affidavit, which is a part of mandatory disclosure. And I'm trying to figure out like because it seems to me as if most attorneys want to at least get that $500 to $7,500 retainer up front, and that's to get you up to mediation. And in my experience, it's not a lot for most people. And I'm not talking about the very divorces, because divorces can be very complicated on what goes on within that. But for child custody cases within itself, and if the people are somewhat reasonable, right? If the people are somewhat reasonable, why it costs between 5 grand and 7,500 to get you to mediation. And when I say get you to mediation, I mean at least being prepared for mediation, because I've seen attorneys come to mediation and they were not prepared, and it was a waste of time. um but it's gonna cost. It seems as if most attorneys want to get at least the average around 5 grand for a retainer. And it's important, especially when you're doing with these attorneys, because you'll some people will burn through them. And so you're thinking like by your second or third attorney, you've already spent, 10, $15,000 on a retainer, and there hasn't much been done. Remember, we can go back up to these gatekeeping parents because that's one of the things that some parents will use to leverage during this entire process. They will leverage gatekeeping, they will leverage withholding the child because it kind of pressures. You'll see most men get pressured into signing agreements just because they want to spend time with their child, right? That guilt shame thing that we start to talk about. So these are, pay attention to the different types of attorneys. You can also go pro se if you really want to dive into it or have someone kind of mentor you through it. There are some attorneys that will, you can pay for an hour or 2 hours of their time. And to be honest with you, that might be interesting. That might be an interesting road to take if it's not a real high conflict situation. Um, the judicial time frame. My the judge that I had mentioned in Palm Beach County that they like to get these things resolved. Custody cases and custody and child support kind of go hand in hand. You can do child support without custody, but you really can't do custody without child support. Um, we, well, this is America, right? So I heard my judge say they aim to resolve cases within 180 days. So that means that and I think this is honestly, I think this is the minimum, depending on the reasonableness of the parties. Remember that word, reasonable. So which is 180 days, which is 6 months. Remember when you do have the attorneys and the court has a calendar, each attorney has calendars. You got some attorneys that are very busy, so they tend to push things off an inordinate amount of time. You have, and then they have to get with the other attorney. If that attorney is busy, then it might get pushed off. So I was in a situation where mediation was pushed off for 2 or 3 months. But also remember this gatekeeping parent. This is a part of their, I call it a I call it a strategy. I had an attorney that was like, it's not really a strategy. It's just the nature. Um, so some people want to start to push these things off as far as possible. Because if you push off mediation, 2 to 3 months, that adds to this calendar. So that's 2 to 3 months gone. Then if you don't notice to trial or you do a notice to trial, then the attorneys and the first you have to get a date set for the case update. So then that might be 2 months later. Then you get a notice if you notice a trial, and then you get a certain amount of time for discovery. Then once again, the court calendar, the attorneys have to come together and figure it out. So I mean, I've seen it go on for I honestly think that you got a budget. If you're diligent, budget about a year. Budget about a year. So pay attention to that. Something else to expect are understanding your local rules and the standards. Local rules are huge, and you can probably look them up in on your court's website. We can in Palm Beach County. You can look up and I got the standards on there as well. So you can look up the standard possession for each person, what it used to be anyways. It's 50-50 now. So the one that's currently on there is kind of out of date. But look up what it is. Look up the relocation rules. Look up because a lot of the judges still look to some of these rules in order to come up with their judgment. So remember, you needed to. So and your attorney really should know a lot about these local rules. But if you're looking at it yourself, just to understand and know what to expect, check out the different standards. Communicate. I mean, it goes anywhere from communication. They have orders for communication. They have orders for timeshare, which once again is I think is outdated. So it probably needs to be updated. What you need to expect is the narrative, the stereotypes, and the biases, especially I believe as a black male going through the process. Because it was interesting to me to that how I had to explain myself. And then, and I probably communicate a little bit better than others, and I really dove deep into it. However, some of the things that will be overlooked because of the stereotypes of not wanting to be in children's lives, supposedly, which is interesting because I think this generation of men are the most active with their children, regardless of whether they're with the mother or not. They at least attempt to, or at least they say they do. As far as the people that I'm around, I know they want to be in their children's lives and they put forth the effort. However, sometimes you kind of got to wonder. And so some of these things are some of the is what you're kind of fighting against. You're fighting against the narrative, the stereotypes, the biases, and once again the status quo. Because the longer you allow this thing to linger, the harder it is. And your initial order or whatever it is that you sign, the initial parenting plan, judges from my understanding and knowing, from what I know, they don't want to change these orders. So if you decided to kind of sleep through your first custody dispute and you just allowed your attorney to do whatever they wanted to do initially, or you signed something every other weekend because you kind of were told that this is how it's supposed to go, and without getting the proper information, and so there's a status quo that's established. It's going to be even more expensive and longer and an uphill battle. There has to be some type of substantial and material change. People get screwed a lot, especially within I've seen in child support, because um they don't get it right the first time. And so now when you're trying to go back and change it, no judge really wants to drop it. And then they're going to say, well, you were making X amount of money 3, 4 years ago. What changed? And you really have to explain why it changed. And once again, it has to go in the best interest of the child. So how can you, especially with inflation and everything, how can you want to pay less and inflation is happening and it's going to be in the best interest of the child? So what I've started to see is that people shut down. They allow whatever to happen to happen. I've seen a lot of uncontested cases, things that just go straight through without any objections, any back and forth. Yeah, with the courts, you don't file anything, you don't file counter petitions, etc. And I've seen, then you get screwed, and then a year later you come back to your senses, and you get past it. I almost missed something. Let me go back up to. I didn't even put it in here. Let me tell you something about. It's called the silver bullet. It's so important. I'm going to have to type it in. Hold on. I almost forgot. And there's a lot that I'm not. I mean, this is why we really would have to sit down and have a conversation. Let me let me put this one up here. This is called, and I just found out the term that there's actual term for it. But it happens. It's so prevalent within it. It's amazing. I think judges are getting better with it because I'm starting to see it come back, and it's getting harder to prove. But this is what they call the silver bullet, and you got a lot of unethical people out there and unscrupulous people, immoral people that will use this. Now, the silver bullet is getting a restraining order against the other party, and it's incredible the amount of people and that I've come across that this has happened to. And so a restraining order, my ignorant brain prior to this, I'm like, well, a restraining order has to do with, you being violent, police being called, etc. Listen, you can text the other party too much, especially, and then don't get to texting crazy things, threatening in a threatening manner, or you can call a party too much. You can call, you can text, you can be showing up to where they feel unsafe. Essentially, I believe in some counties it's even if you're disturbing their peace. So don't get me wrong. I definitely understand that these things do happen. I've just never seen it happen en masse, and like how I've seen it with and used within this thing, and not even just seen it. I've witnessed the conversations and the advice, because that's what it is, or information advice that people give to other people in order to use the silver bullet so that you can get the upper hand within the situation. Because if you get a restraining order put on yourself, and if this happened took place where a child was involved, Now you got two cases. You're two things that you're dealing with. Now you're dealing with your child custody situation, and you're dealing in with the criminal court, and no phone calls, no anything. I've seen, but and I would imagine it seems as if this was going on a lot more, maybe, 2, 3, 4 years ago, where this was happening a lot. And from my understanding, the judges are really starting to pay attention to it, because now what they're doing is saying, well, before it was like you can't talk to the other parent, and you can't have talk deal with the kids until this is taken care of. So that further extends that 180 days. But now you can essentially have the kids not be on it if this didn't take place around the kids, and there's no witnesses to that. However, it could still be with the other party, and you can get the kids now, but you would have to meet like at a police station, or maybe someone else has to drop the kids off, so on and so forth. But I really want people to pay attention to this, because especially in the initial, um, you know, separation and initial filings, because it tends to be like this happens initially, like boom, it's filed, and within the first month or 2 months, boom, there's a because of disturbing the peace. So you really need to be careful about how you're communicating with the other person, the other party. You really need to pay attention and I would say almost like go no contact. Like if it's not about the children and something that you can actually do, then there's really no back and forth. Keep messages short. This is just my thought process and my experience. Keep it short. Don't, there's no longer going in, because once it comes to this point, someone or both of you are being unreasonable. And because that situation is happening, it, people will go all out. You start to say, I never thought that someone would treat them this way. Yeah, yeah. And it happens quite often. You're not the only one. Uh, I'm gonna end this last one, is the ignorance portion of it, the ignorance and the avoidance portion of it, because this is something that I had to really dig into. And I don't know how ignorant I was to it, more so if I just needed a lot more information, and maybe I overdid it with the information. And should just let the professionals do what the professionals did. But what I've noticed, that you need to, in this situation, regardless of whether you have your even if you do have an attorney, is you kind of want to lead your case. Meaning that if you're dealing with a decent attorney, this attorney has other clients, and possibly, you know, le- I I couldn't even break down the model of an attorney. I would imagine an attorney has to be successful, has to have at least 20 to 30 cases going on at any one time, um, and possibly have a paralegal that helps as well. Let's just say this is the average attorney. Some attorneys don't even have a paralegal; they're just doing it on their own, which I think is interesting as well. Some of them do take time to deal with you, but you're dealing with a busy attorney that hears this all the time. So if you're man, it's hard to manage. I would imagine, to manage 30 different cases going on at the same time, and the different and the all the nuances within it. So what I saw was a lot of attorneys getting ready, like, the day before trial, some the day of trial. I've heard attorneys showing up with nothing to trial, or to a hearing. And so you got to kind of remind them, they're flipping through paperwork, they're trying to get accustomed to it. So it would behoove you to get as much information as you possibly can, and kind of lead it, and also inform them of different things. Let your attorney tell you what's not important, what's important. Because and what will be effective during this entire process. Because really that's what it is. Everything is important during this process, but some things aren't as effective as other things during the process. So you kind of want that type of counseling. You kind of want to lead your attorney and say, hey, that's not the case. This is what's going on, and kind of bring certain things to light, and really listening to what it is they have to say. It's a lot. Next week, we'll be back. Hopefully, I'll have my brother Joel with me. Um, And once again, if you all have any questions in regards to this, and let me tell you something. And I'm looking at the clock now. I went on for about 35 minutes. This is like a drop in the bucket. That's why it's important to, as you read down there, to get some type of advice for your specific case and issues. And and don't believe that you are different, because that's what it also seems with for a lot of, it seems to me, everybody, I would imagine, is that everyone thinks that they're different. But if after seeing, like I said, speaking to hundreds of different people, we're looking at a bunch of different cases, a lot of this stuff is very, it's eerily similar of the breakdown of it. And I mean, this stuff that I'm telling you right now could save you, 10, 50, not gonna say 15,000, but close close to $10,000 easily, just by kind of grasping what it is you're up against and not being ignorant to it. Once again, put your information in the chat, or the comment section. When I get you, I'll get you. I appreciate you all for checking in. I will see you next week.